morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the wrap-up day of Enterprise 2.0. I know the crowd is thinned out a little bit at this point. That just means that we have a tighter social network to get to know each other better. I'm David Carr. I'm the editor of The Brainyard, which is the section on informationweek.com where we talk about enterprise social media and collaboration technologies. We're here today to talk about big data and social media analytics. I decided to take a couple of the biggest buzzwords going around and mash them together and see if we can make a session out of that. A lot of the buzz about social media analytics is about monitoring buzz. All those mentions of your company or your brand or your product out on Facebook and Twitter and all these blogs. Pulling that together, doing sentiment analysis so you know whether those mentions are positive or negative, or maybe they're a question or a confusion about your products that you need to address in some way. It's also about analyzing the networks of people. Who's connected to who? You can see that through these social networks. Who's following through, who's friends with who, who's talking to who, where are the centers of expertise, of influence. Now, big data is a somewhat generic term for dealing with really enormous, usually internet-scale quantities of data that you can't really reload into a traditional relational database because the database would explode. If you want to parse all the posts on Twitter, you're going to be needing to load that analysis into something more like Hadoop. Hadoop is an open source clone, essentially, of some technologies that are in use at Google for taking in all the data that they have gathered from around the web, farming it out across often thousands of PC class, relatively inexpensive servers, letting each of them crunch away on that data and then feed it back into an index. Now, our speakers will get a chance to introduce themselves in a moment, but I want to say that I'm really pleased with the quality of this panel. Zach Hoffershall is a Forrester Research. It's somebody who I go to on a regular basis for his knowledge of the vendors in this space, a space he calls social intelligence. Essentially the same thing that we're talking about here today. I don't want to say he knows all the vendors because it seems like a new one pops up every 15 minutes. David Catalius I first spoke with when his company, Proximal Labs, was acquired by Jive Software. This is just back in April. His company had been in existence for less than a year at that point, but Jive snapped them up because of the quality of the big data analytics team he had pulled together. Some of David's ideas about social network analysis go back to research he worked on for DARPA. I found this fascinating because in Iraq, one of the ways they use this kind of analysis was to look at the communications between captains out in the field to figure out who had the most knowledge and experience about countering new improvised explosive device techniques that the enemy was using that were killing our soldiers. So this was social analytics for the purpose of doing a better job of spreading that knowledge and saving lives. Michael Wu is principal scientist at Lithium Technologies. Michael was hired straight out of academia. He was at UC Berkeley. He'd earned a triple major in applied math, physics, and molecular and cell biology. Before he was hired by Lithium in 2008, he was a research scholar there working on things like mathematical modeling of how neurons interact with each other. Today, I guess he's modeling how the neurons in your brain light up when you use social media, what people react to, even things like how to use game-like techniques, gamification, to build rewards into specific communities that encourage participation. And he's also looking at how to map out areas of expertise, areas of influence. Who are the people in a community that you need to pay the most attention to? Now, David and Michael both know a lot about this big data topic that I've been discussing. One of my questions for them is how much those of you who work in enterprise IT need to understand about this. The programming model, the operational model are different enough that you probably have to bring some new skills into your organization if you want to run your own Hadoop clusters. On the other hand, you might be working with a hosted service provider, and both Jive and Lithium have services where they essentially will worry about all those technical details behind the scenes, and they will give you answers about what's being said about your company, your brand, and so on. So with that, let's get started. David, my first question for you is, are there scenarios you see where enterprise IT does need to be doing its own big data analysis? And if so, how can that be integrated with what you can provide through Jive? Mr. Toastmaster.